everyone. Welcome back to Sage, the podcast where we talk to the people who know best how to thrive on campus. I'm Maddie Priest, and here with me today is Kacie Sinton. So, Kacie, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do for the Gay Straight Alliance?
So I'm the assistant coordinator for the Gay Straight Alliance. My job is officially basically just like taking meeting minutes, working out scheduling, helping balance budget, organize stuff, and also to kind of just be like a face for the community, I guess. And unofficially, it's a lot of working with the campus to create a better environment for LGBT students, which unfortunately the campus has been pretty severely lacking up until relatively recent years. But yeah, that's mostly what I do. I make posters sometimes, but it's not my official job.
So what is the best part for you about being involved with GSA?
It's probably just has to do with being able to create a safe space for all of these queer kids, because like I know that when I was a freshman, I had just started transitioning, and I had just kind of started like coming out to like family that wasn't, my immediate family, or friends that I hadn't spoken to in a little while and whatnot. And I know that definitely having the GSA around to kind of, I guess, counterbalance this unfamiliarity with like this familiarity with a bunch of people that, they might not be going through the exact same things as me, but we all have relatively unified experiences. So being able to create an environment that's that helpful for other people is very important to me. And it's very important to me that people feel safe on campus and represented, and that they feel like they have somewhere to go.
So currently you guys are working on Unity Fest,
Mm-hmm.
so that's in the process of happening this week.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on with that?
So basically we have a week-long series of events every semester that basically just consists of each alliance doing 1 to sometimes as many as 3 events for a week. So we kicked off this semester's Unity Fest with a drag show on Saturday at the Point, which was pretty successful. We had 200-ish people show up, which was a lot more than I thought we were going to get, which was honestly a little heartening for me. And then we also do stuff like grocery bingo is usually something that's run by the Cultural Diversity Board. Tonight we have the Color Run, which is like another CDB thing. There's the Luau tomorrow, which is the Hawaiian Student Alliance's thing. And we also have there's a summit that's going to be happening tomorrow that's put on by One Colorado that we're sponsoring. It's technically part of this, but it's not like officially, quote unquote.
What's the inspiration behind doing Unity Week?
Well, CMU is not a super diverse campus. With most campuses, especially in the Western U.S., there's kind of a cultural void that happens for a lot of students. And because a lot of our students are from Hawaii or they're international students, and it's not like a majority by any means, but it's still enough that there can be a community built around it. The school kind of capitalized on being able to create a community that's like officially sanctioned by the school. So it doesn't end up, if there's a conflict of leadership, it doesn't end up totally dissolving. So in essence, because we're such a culturally void campus a lot of the time, the whole point of this is to kind of tell people that, we're here. For those of us who are in like the LGBT community especially, it's kind of a like, hey, we're here, you're not alone, and stuff, because we have people tend to hide a little bit more in our community. But for most of the other ones, it's kind of just, it's education and community, I think, and removal of ignorance.
Getting back to the GSA, when are your meetings and who can attend them?
So our meetings are usually Tuesdays at 5 p.m. In Student Life. Occasionally we do events, or like we go see a movie or something like that as a group. And those are occasionally at different times or different days. I think it was 2 weeks ago we went and saw Love, Simon, for obvious reasons. instead of our usual weekly meeting. But usually they're Tuesdays at 5 up in Student Life, and they're open to anyone. Like, we're not gonna throw you out if you're straight, obviously. I think that's kind of in the name, but most people kind of miss that because we just refer to it as the GSA. But it's for basically anyone who has any interest in finding community about something that's queer related, I guess would be a way to put it. So we have a lot of people who come somewhat on them like more irregularly, who have like family members who fall under the LGBT umbrella, or we have people who are just really good friends with a lot of our members and who are not necessarily like queer themselves, but they'll still come to our meetings just to support those around them. But yeah.
So I can see that there's a lot you guys are doing to help students who are in the LGBT community. What do you think the biggest struggles are that they face?
It varies day to day, and it also depends on the person in particular, and also where under the umbrella they fall. So for myself, a lot of the issues that I end up running into are like last week, the Colorado House of Representatives struck down a bill that would have essentially rolled back protections for LGBT people and remove us as a protected class. And thankfully that was struck down, but that was a big stressor of mine. But someone else, it might just be family stuff. It very much depends on the person, but it all centers around some people just not being able to comprehend that we're just people. And it very much does differ between the different parts of the acronym. So for a lot of trans people, it's a big question of bathrooms right now, still, unfortunately. For instance, I was originally planning to go with my parents on a trip to Alaska this summer, but here in about a week, Alaskan residents will be voting on a bill that would essentially make it illegal for me to use the bathroom of my choosing. And, obviously I need to use the bathroom, especially if we're traveling. So if I'm legally not allowed to use the bathroom, suddenly I can't travel. And this is something that's I have to take into effect, but, some of my friends who are cisgender but lesbians might not necessarily.
What can we do as a campus to help support students who are LGBT?
As a campus, just as students, I've not really had many complaints when it comes to students. When it comes to the student body, most people are extremely accepting. Usually whenever there's cases of bigotry, it's not actual like violent bigotry, it more just comes from ignorance. And usually people are willing to learn more about our community, especially. It's actually more of a question of like logistical stuff with the campus. Because I know for with me, especially with trans people in particular, living on campus is very difficult. And it's getting better. I've been working with housing over the past year to kind of put together an actual system in place that basically makes it so that trans people can live on campus without having to out themselves to res life and all of their suite mates or roommates or whatever. And it makes it so it's not like a multi-week process trying to find housing on campus. And a lot of it is just like I mentioned with the ignorance-based bigotry, is that like you can't change what you want to be referred to if it's not your legal name in our system. So when I first started coming to school here, after every single class that I'd have for like the first time, so at the beginning of every semester, I'd have to go up to my professor and explain the whole situation and out myself and everything, and that's just not ideal. So there are a few things that the campus itself could do better, but in terms of students, I think it's mostly positive. I think I personally have had very few issues, and most of the trans people I know have had very few as well.
So I know when people come to campus, people who originally thought maybe they were heterosexual or thought they were cisgender are starting to kind of learn more about themselves. What resources are there for students who are starting to realize that maybe their sexual orientation and gender identity isn't what they spent their whole life thinking it was?
That's a hard question. It kind of depends on the person and what they need. So for on campus, there's not actually a lot of resources for questioning people in particular. Like obviously we have the GSA and myself and the coordinator, Ashley, will obviously help you through anything we can in the best way that we can. But, she's an acting and directing major. I'm a mass communication major. Like, we're in no way trained to deal with this. So most of our expertise comes from anecdotes, basically. Like, it's all anecdotal. However, that's not to say there aren't any resources in Grand Junction. There's actually a woman who started practicing 4 or 5 months ago, I think. Her name is Devin Pinkston, and she specializes in doing therapy specifically for trans people. And I think she does some stuff for cisgender LGB people. So there are resources. And again, it very much depends on what part of the acronym they belong to. Because if someone's questioning that, hey, I might be gay, that's very different from, hey, I might be trans. And it's different in just how it's handled, I guess, and how personally you can handle it.
So, would you mind sharing your story a little bit?
Where do you want me to start? I guess I'll just start at the beginning, I guess. Most of my childhood, I grew up in very small towns. The first city I lived in was this little tiny 5,000 people town in Utah called Kanab. And I spent the first 10 years of my life there, and then I spent the next 10-ish in Montrose, which is about an hour away from here. And Grand Junction is the largest city I've ever lived in my life. So that obviously caused some differences in my queer awakening, as it were, than it would with most other people who live in like cities and whatnot, because like Denver has an all lesbians and gay flag football team. Montrose is like having its first Pride maybe this summer. Like there's a pretty big difference there. So as a result, growing up, my parents never really talked about queer stuff. Like they had gay friends, and like one of the first weddings I went to was actually a lesbian wedding. It was before gay marriage was legalized, but they just didn't care. So it's not like they were particularly negative about it. It's just that they didn't talk about it. And, me as a child very much kind of assumed that, if my parents aren't talking about it, then I should just listen to everyone else's opinion on it. And growing up in these small rural communities, it caused me to develop a lot of negativity towards the LGBT community when I was very young. And obviously when I started, hitting puberty and kind of figuring all of this out, that caused a lot of internal issues for myself, because all of a sudden I was like, oh God, I don't feel right in this body. I don't want to be a boy. This whole puberty thing is horrible and wrong, and I don't feel comfortable with it at all. But I'd always been taught that anyone who goes against these cisnormative, heteronormative standards are wrong or sick or otherwise damaged. And I'm still dealing with the fallout from that to a degree, but I think I kind of realized I was trans when I was probably like 10 or 11. So I was pretty young. But I didn't know how to articulate it. I didn't know the words for it at that point. And it took me until I was 17. No, I was 17 when I came out to my parents for the second time. And that was the time when I was basically like, okay, I want to transition. I want to do this, because if I don't, I'm probably not going to live past 20. Because I was incredibly unhappy. I was incredibly depressed. I was kind of a forced introvert, in that, like, I'm normally pretty extroverted, but the fact that I was dealing with so much stuff in my head, I couldn't interact with people in the way that I wanted to. So the period from 10 to 17 was filled with a lot of like small coming outs. But it took me 8 years before I actually got this ball rolling. Is there anything specific you want to know about? Because it's a very broad, long history.
Yeah. Well, I think I just basically want to make sure that if there's someone listening who is currently like going through something like that, they know that maybe what they're going through isn't totally crazy, it's like, there's other people like me
Right.
who are experiencing something similar.
Well, I will say this, that it's definitely going to feel like you're going crazy for a little bit. Just because all of a sudden your brain is going against all of these norms that have been reinforced from birth, essentially. But I guess something I hear from a lot of people who are questioning or who are wanting help with coming out or who are struggling with feelings like this themselves are that a lot of them kind of develop these anxieties of like, well, what if I'm not trans enough? Or what if I'm just faking this for attention? Or like it's just it just plagues them with self-doubt. And I guess in cases like that, it's something I like to reinforce is just like, there's no such thing as trans enough. Like there's no correct way to be trans. Like for me, the correct way to be trans personally is I do hormone therapy. I dress a certain way. I sometimes do makeup. I sometimes don't. I just kind of go with what makes me happy. And to some people, that's not what makes them happy. And that's just kind of human life, I guess. And just do what makes you happy. Because if you don't, life's gonna suck. Long story short.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how people who aren't cisgender and aren't heterosexual think that like they're not fitting into a box, and then once they realize that, then they have to fit into a box within their community because they think that they have to act a certain way.
That's something that has always really frustrated me because I'm not particularly like traditionally feminine. I'm not a huge fan of skirts. I'm not a huge fan of dresses. Heels are the worst. Like the only thing that I'm actually really, traditionally feminine into is like makeup. And even then it's not the traditional like, almost draggy kind of makeup that a lot of people expect trans women to wear. And that's just very frustrating because it's like, if I were cis, this would be fine. Like, it wouldn't be a question on anyone's mind. But because I'm trans, I have to fit into this box of hyper femininity, and I'm just not about that. Like, I don't want to spend 2 hours on my makeup every morning. I break out a straightener like twice a year. Like, it's just not my thing, I guess. And that's okay. Like, if anyone tries to tell you that, you're not being a girl correctly, then they have some of their own issues they need to work out, because that's just rude.
Yeah. So what do you think the biggest misconception is about people who are trans or just the LGBT community in general?
That we're all the same. Or this kind of goes hand in hand. That we're either all the same or that there's specific, like, requirements, I guess, that have to be fulfilled in order for someone to be, like, correctly trans or correctly queer in general. Because one of the things that I really... It's an issue I didn't anticipate having to deal with, is that because I've started ever since I started transitioning, and because I present as female, and I look relatively female and whatnot, I use feminine pronouns and stuff, people assume I'm straight. They'll assume that, like, now that I'm presenting as a woman, I'm gonna like men, and that's very much, well, it's not 100% of the case, but it's usually the case. And with I've heard issues, I've heard trans men having similar issues to this. Like I have a friend on campus who he's also trans, and he doesn't like girls at all, and he identifies as a gay trans man. And for whatever reason, that's just really hard for people to get their head around. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of like, trans people are just as diverse and just as unique as the rest of the world, as are most queer people. And a lot of this is incredibly subjective. And a lot of this is not uniform. And a lot of this is very much defined by the individual. And making assumptions about a community you don't know is, well, one, it's flagrantly incorrect, and two, it's kind of rude. Because, we're all different people, we're all unique people, and I guess it's just kind of, don't assume stereotypes, I guess. Like, And also stop assuming that trans women and drag queens are the same thing. Like, God, I don't look like... I don't know. That's just something that happens a lot, is people will assume that the line between... There is no line between a drag queen and a trans woman. But one thing I kind of like to reinforce is that drag is theater. Like, it's on the same level as, you know, women in Shakespeare plays in the 1600s. It's all theater. Trans women are not theater. Like, we're not pretending. I personally have not gone through years of, you know, hormone replacement therapy and worrying about insurance and losing friends and stressing family members out and dealing with bigotry and stuff just to kind of, you know, be a man in a dress, I guess, would be a way to put it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely still a lot of ignorance when it comes to the LGBT community, you know, and, you know, for as many people as there are who are not willing to learn about it, you know, it's good that there's still people who are taking an interest and wanting to learn more.
One thing that I hear a lot from people who want to learn but aren't really sure where to start is that a lot of them are very, very worried about offending us, me in particular, because that's kind of what most of the people I talk to. And it's just, like, it's really not hard to not offend us. Like, just don't use slurs. Like, that's not hard. And granted, there are some terms that have kind of fallen out of favor in recent years, like transsexual is no longer used because it's no longer accurate. If you call me that, but do so out of ignorance, I'm not going to, like, come unglued at you. Like, I'm not going to start, I don't know, I'm not going to tase you or something. Usually, we're just going to correct you and move on. And I guess, you know, if you're willing to learn, also be willing to change your habits, I guess.
Definitely. Is there anything else that you want to add?
I guess if there's anyone that's listening to this that this kind of applies to, or if they have any concerns, you're not alone. And I know it might kind of feel like it sometimes, and I know that it definitely feels like the world's out to get us sometimes, but, well, you're not alone, and you'll figure this out eventually. I mean, I haven't yet, and I don't think I will for a little while, but I definitely have things more figured out than I did 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, the progress is what's important, you know?
Yeah. Take things day by day. You're not gonna see change on an hourly basis or even a weekly basis, but just recognize the change is happening, and while it's happening slowly, progress is always the important thing, as long as you keep moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, this has been Kacie here talking to us about LGBT life and resources on campus. I'm Maddie Priest. Thank you for tuning in.